At least 1 in every 5 Africans goes to bed hungry, according to the World Bank. Overall, more than 283 million people, about a third of all of the world's most hungry people, are in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is at the eye of the perfect storm of food, fuel, and fertilizer crises brought on by the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. The effects of these we see in our rising cost of food and fuel, as well as soaring inflation, and many others. That's why African heads of state and governments, as well as Agric entrepreneurs and development partners, are meeting in Dakar at the Feed Africa Summit to discuss the continent's food insecurity. Now, the 3-day conference will also discuss how Africa can insulate itself from external shocks like Russia's war in Ukraine. The high-level meeting organized by Senegalese government is an opportunity to seek out concrete actions that will lead to Africa's food sovereignty. Here is Senegalese President Macky Sall on the need for Africa to feed Africa.
L'Afrique doit apprendre à se nourrir par elle-même et à contribuer à donner de la nourriture au monde. Nous en avons le potentiel. Nous sommes 1,4 milliard d'habitants, établis sur plus de 30 millions de kilomètres carrés, avec plus de 60% des terres arables non exploitées de la planète. Pour transformer notre potentiel en réalité, il nous faut allouer au moins 10% du budget national au secteur agricole. Cela requiert un engagement volontariste et votre présence massive est un signal positif, une prise de conscience partagée des leaders.
And here's why Macky Sall makes such a passionate call. The continent currently imports over 100 million tons or $70 billion worth of food annually from the rest of the world. Participants at the Feed Africa Summit are hoping to curtail that by creating ecosystems that ensure an independent and food-secure Africa. So far, co-organizers, the African Development Bank, has pledged to commit about $10 billion over the next 5 years in direct support to food and agriculture programs. Questions are, what will it take for Africa to maximize its undercultivated arable lands? If Africa can't feed itself, how? Will be the next question. Thanks for choosing The Square. I am Keminni Amanor. Joining our gathering today are Nicholus Obby Mainza. He's District Agriculture Coordinator at the Ministry of Agriculture in Zambia. We also have joining us from Abuja, Azubike Nwokoye. He's Food and Agriculture Program Manager of ActionAid. Gentlemen, you're welcome to The Square. I'll start with you. Great. I'll start with you, Azubike. Africa needs to feed itself is something that, has been made strong at the summit. We know it is possible. Today, I want to find out, where do we begin?
Okay. It's good that African presidents are having these summits, and I hope, and we all hope, that they will match their words with action. One of the problems that have riddled the agriculture sector is the issue of low investment, very low investment in agriculture. Many countries in Africa are not doing up to 10% annually, and they are not also investing in that critical sector. And just to also say that only 6% of cultivated land in Africa is irrigated. And with issues of climate change, we cannot afford not to invest massively in irrigation. So first of all, 10% and above 10% and above budgetary allocation in the agriculture sector with timely releases, because at times the releases are not also done on time. We find out that at the end of each year, most budgets will be doing less than 50% of the capital, while recurrent will do 100%. So that needs to be handled critically. And if we are talking about those key investments, they have to go into the areas of extension services, access to credit, women in agriculture, youth in agriculture, appropriate labor-saving technologies, inputs. A lot of investment needs to go into post-harvest losses reduction support, areas like investing in processing facilities, storage facilities, training farmers on reducing post-harvest losses, and also providing market access. And a lot of investments need to also go into agroecology, climate resilient sustainable agriculture, research and development, monitoring and evaluation, and as well as coordination to ensure that each African country can feed itself. And African countries need to use support to take advantage of the African continental free trade area that has been established.
Very well. I want to take us to Zambia now. The World Bank considers Zambia one of the thriving places when it comes to Agric. Nicholus, what makes Zambia that? You're muted, Nicholus.
Good afternoon, Africa.
We can hear you now.
Yes, so I want to start with, yes, the summit has been organized by Senegal. I commend Senegal for that. And this is actually a very good forum for African leaders to come together and actually deliberate over the proceedings of how Africa can feed herself. I just want to give you a brief, figures or statistics. You actually find that globally, 828 million people suffer from hunger. And then just Africa alone, it accounts for 249 million people that are actually hungry. So this implies that about 4/3 of the total, population which is hungry comes from Africa. Then we actually, have the, for us to achieve the SDG number 2 on zero, on zero hunger, we actually cannot, achieve this unless Africa actually becomes, stands up and be, passionate and active about agriculture. The UN also has noted that Africa must be a focus then, if we are actually to reduce the numbers of people who are actually hungry. So, I just want to make mention that I think our governments in Africa, as in general, there's been, I might call it a wrong priority in terms of sectors that actually prioritize to support. There's what you may call a primary sector. Department is a primary sector or, compact that needs to be given the first attention. And that's when you can now move on to education and health. For a teacher to be able to move to school and go and be able to teach our the learners, somebody needs our food first. They need to eat. Even for a patient, be able to take up medication and get healed, somebody needs food first. So priority then must then be, focused on agriculture as a priority, so that then everything else.
So what I'm asking, Nicholus, is what are some of the interventions that Zambia has employed over the years?
Yes, I was actually just giving a background, then I was coming on to that. For Zambia, we are actually in the southern region of Africa, where we've not been spared, where the climatic change in terms of uncoordinated rainfall distribution, pathetic weather is concerned. Zambia has also been hit, but nevertheless, there are interventions that, government has put across, where, we've begun to plan, and encourage our small-scale farmers and commercial farmers to go instead of us to depend on the rain-fed, crops. We are actually encouraging farmers, to utilize, to spend money, invest in irrigation. At the same time, also, we are also embracing mechanization. I think there's been a lot of organization coming on board. I may make mention of CAMCO, I may make mention of other organizations in Conservation Farming Unit, that have been proclaiming, the usage of mechanization. It is a platform that is actually helping us to increase on productivity as well as production. So I think those are a few forums that Zambia has actually taken in order to combat, the fight for hunger.
Very well. I come back to you, Azubike. You mentioned low investment, and I want us to tackle that for a bit. A lot of the interventions that exist on the continent, as far as the Agric sector is concerned, are donor funded. And we can begin to say that that is also a sign of what you have said, low investment in the sector. How do we then begin to own our food?
Okay, that's why I said that our presidents need to take charge. We need to put our money where our mouth is, which is in the agriculture sector. We have the comparative advantage. The Russia-Ukraine war, for instance, because of the Russia-Ukraine war, price of bread went up quite high across many countries, and some other staples. If we had done our investment right, we shouldn't be importing wheat because many countries also have comparative advantage. For instance, Nigeria imports about 95% of its wheat. That shouldn't be. We should be producing a lot of wheat here and not importing up to 95%, even if we are going to import. Then, like I mentioned, there is quite low investment in extension services. The number of extension services, extension agents is quite low to meet the number of farmers to support. So in Nigeria, at times you have one extension agent that is supposed to support about 10,000 family farms. How is that possible? That's impossible. So a lot of investment in terms of capacity building, providing operational costs, motorcycles, vehicles, and transport allowance, training and retraining should be able to sort that out. And also investment in terms of access to cheap credit. Access to credit is a big problem for smallholder farmers. And if we are going to achieve agricultural growth, investments should actually focus on smallholder farmers, especially women, because they hold the trigger. For you to trigger growth, it should be investment focused on supporting smallholder farmers, especially women. Then we are also faced with issues of large post-harvest losses. So across Africa, in some places, farmers are faced with over 50%.
I'd have us talk a bit more about the post-harvest losses in the latter part of our discussion. But I'll move over to Nicholus now. Nicholus, let's talk about maximizing land use at the summit. And something we have long known that 65% or at least 60% of the world's arable lands are here on the continent. However, only 10% of that is being cultivated. The opposite side of that is the problem of land ownership on the continent. Talk to us about how Zambia has gone around land ownership in the tenure system in order to help smallholder farmers.
Thank you. You've actually touched on the point that I wanted to make mention that, despite having 65% of arable land, to feed about 9 billion people worldwide by 2050, as anticipated, Africa imports over 100 million metric tons of food at the cost of about $75 billion annually. That is too much. We have plenty of land in Africa. Actually, that is one of the comparative advantages this continent has over Europe, over South America, North America, all the other continents. Africa has that comparative advantage. We have massive land that actually is not made use of. So then coming down to Zambia, the aspect of land ownership, I think that's where we are actually scoring points on, as a country. Government has made a deliberate policy where now land ownership has been extended to the women folks. Women now, they are given the rights also to own land, as well as any other qualifying individual, maybe for example, youth, they are able to acquire land and even get titles. So then my colleague just mentioned that we need to embrace the women when it comes to agriculture. Believe you me, these are the true facts that, women, once you support them with agricultural inputs, give them the resources that are needed, they ensure that they put those resources to the intended purpose or use, as compared to the other category, which is men. You give them a bit of inputs, the other inputs they may divert and buy other things, use the resources elsewhere, and then, at the expense of the cost of producing food. So Zambia has made that deliberate policy to allow women also to own land.
Very well.
So
Let's hear from Azubike.
Which is actually helping us to increase.
Azubike, I want to hear from you on the same question. If you could take a dig at it. We have the land, yes, but our land ownership system makes it a complex issue to cultivate the land, and it will perhaps explain why we have only cultivated 10% of it. Talk to us about how that affects farming or the agric sector in West Africa, specifically in Nigeria.
Okay, it affects us in so many ways, especially when you come to access and control over land for smallholder women farmers. In Nigeria, access is easier for smallholder women farmers. Smallholder women farmers have about 59% access, have about 29% control, which is about ownership and making decisions on the land, and also only 14% are participating in discussions concerning land governance. Now, what this means is that in general, if you don't have, if you have access, it might be that you had rented the land or somebody borrowed you, or maybe a family member gave you to farm. So it limits what you can also do on the land. For instance, if you put a land into full utilization, apart from planting crops, you can also plant economic trees and other things that take longer time to mature, which will continue giving you money. So the challenge we face is that land governance needs to be worked upon so that smallholder women farmers can have a lot of control and ownership. And also, we need to be careful in Africa because expanding the scope of land that is used for farming might not be entirely the solution, because also we need to focus on productivity. Because you can you can expand land and you can have less productivity. So that's
and that productivity, I want us to
agroecology.
I want us to talk a bit more about that productivity when we come back. You're watching Village Square Africa. We'll be right back with more. Thanks for staying with us here on The Square. Today we are discussing food insecurity in sub-Saharan Africa on the back of the Dakar 2 Summit or the Feed Africa Summit happening in Senegal. And my guests today are Nicholus Obby Mainza, his District Agric Coordinator at the Ministry of Agric in the Zambia. And then we have Azubike Nwokoye. He's Food and Agriculture Program Manager at ActionAid. He's joining us from Abuja-Nigeria. Gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Now, I was saying that we'll talk about the entire productivity cycle. So let's talk about value-added agric. Indeed, it's something that, you know, the heads of states gathered at the summit have been very passionate about, if you like. So let's talk about the entire chain, right? In Zambia, Mainza, if you could share with us, what are some of the efforts you're putting into adding value to Agric that perhaps the rest of sub-Saharan Africa could learn from?
Okay, thank you. Like I'm saying, you know, this is actually time for Africa to fully unlock its agricultural potential. So, you know, the points I would want to stress really on value addition is that, you know, the category of smallholder farmers that we have in Zambia or in Africa at large, they tend to lose a lot of their, you know, household income from, you know, by not, you know, embracing value addition. You know, they may produce whatever they produce as raw materials and then sell it. You know, the value that actually one, you know, sell, for example, take maize, corn. When you sell it as it is raw, you get, you know, a lesser value as compared to, you know, when you are able to produce maize and then you add value, probably, you know, meal and make, you know, make mini meal out of it. You collect maize bran out of it that can be used as a stock feed. You know, that is now, you know, maximizing, you know, the product that you are able to, you know, have at a smaller piece of land. So what actually Zambia has done, you know, to embrace value addition is that we have a lot of chain stores. For example, I may talk of ShopRite, I may talk of Pick and Pay, I may talk of Choppies. You know, instead of, you know, importing food products from outside countries or outside the continent, you know, the government has really come in by putting into place, you know, some deliberate policies that our very own smallholder farmers must be given the opportunity, you know, to grow according to the specifications, you know, the qualities that these chain stores would require and produce successionally. So, you know, for example, take the vegetable value chain. You know, it's just about, you know, organization that is needed for these farmers to come together, maybe form what we may call the agricultural product, you know, production cooperatives, so that there's that succession of production and supply to the chain stores. So it's just, you know, the extension advisory that actually we have tried to improve on, to teach these farmers, to talk to these farmers, the importance, you know, of taking agriculture as a business and not agriculture as usual. So that is the aspect that I think our, you know, agricultural farmers are actually winning on. So we have actually taken it quite seriously by, you know, working together with the private sector, you know, speaking to these farmers, have, you know, conferences, have meetings that we actually invite them.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about, you know, Agric in Zambia and what some of the challenges are, because it's not without its own challenges. But I want to come to you, Azubike, exactly. Just before we go into productivity. Are there any lessons that sub-Saharan Africa could learn from the likes of Tunisia and Morocco when it comes to maximizing whatever it is that we are able to collect as harvest from our Agric sector? Hello, Azubike, can you hear me?
Yeah, could you repeat your question again?
Well, I'm asking what sub-Saharan Africa could learn from, you know, the continental north, like Tunisia and Morocco, who have been able to turn around. Like in Tunisia, we have the olive and the grain because they have added some value to it. In Morocco, we have argan because they've added some value to it. What are they doing differently?
Okay, one of the things they are doing differently is right targeting, and also ensuring that they do proper consultations with target beneficiaries. And also, one thing that needs to happen in general in terms of all other African countries, what are our priority? Because what is also African agriculture is also faced with is also the problem of elite capture. Who is getting the support? Who is the person producing? Is the type of support being provided leading to wealth distribution? So those are some of the issues. So it has to be about wealth distribution, collective ownership of results, collective ownership of benefits, and so on. So consultations need to happen properly. Design need to take cognizance of expected challenges, and also the government must lead investments, not just private sector, because the government investment will create the enabling environment for private sector to be able to also invest.
Very well. I want us to talk about productivity. In order to ensure productivity, Azubike, would have to be able to feed our soils constantly in order to produce what we need before, the rest of the chain works on it. In Kenya, for instance, the president says that they will be importing fertilizer and giving it to these farmers, but that's only a short-term solution. In the long term, what are some of the ways that we can work around getting perhaps our own fertilizer?
Okay, so what we have been pushing is agroecology, whereby you also reduce a lot of external inputs like chemical fertilizers and so on, because those production systems are not sustainable. We have been able to work with other stakeholders to train farmers on how to make their compost and how to do a lot of things on their own rather than depending on external inputs. We are not totally saying that external inputs are not important, but it shouldn't be what leads the process. So, because also when you put a lot of external input, chemical input, it means that the shelf life of your produce is also lower, So it has to be about agroecological approaches, whereby you use other crops, creeping plants to do nitrogen fixation and so on. So we can actually produce our local compost. We can do a lot of things on our own than depending on external chemical inputs. But apart from that, productivity is not just about fertilizer. I mentioned initially essential services, access to essential services. Farmers need to learn the best practice in terms of agronomical practices, because a farmer can have all the quality inputs, but if the farmer don't follow the practical and best steps to bring out the best productivity, it will have low productivity also. And there are combinations you can actually make, so that you can produce sustainably. So in terms of productivity has to go hand in hand with, apart from inputs, quality and quantity number of extension agents to support that productivity. Then it has to also move to the level of reducing post-harvest losses, because if you have plenty harvest and you lose 50% to post-harvest losses, then you have actually lost a lot. For instance, in Nigeria, in terms of access to processing facilities, smallholder women farmers have access to only 18% processing facilities. Storage facilities are about 16.60%. Why access to markets and off-takers is about 13.50%, and transportation is about 9.6%, less than 10%. So issues of electricity, access to road, and so on are part of what can make our agriculture work. So that's why I also mentioned
Azubike, these are issues that we have known since time immemorial as the major obstacles in achieving food security on the continent. It would appear that there isn't the political will to invest in these areas. And as Macky Sall at the summit rightly put, African countries are not contributing their quota, the 10% quota, to the Maputo Declaration. And so here's it for me. How do we ensure that the farmers, the women, the young people who are not at the summit, right, at the end of the day, they benefit from all the talk shop that has happened over there? What would be your advice to the governments?
Okay, the government should walk the talk. The government should put our money where our mouth is, and the government should move away from entire rhetoric. And I also mentioned the issue of elite capture. The government must also take measures to remove elite capture, because it is elite capture that has made our agriculture productivity and investment to be as at what it is now.
Very well. So when you say elite capture, just break it down for us while you make your point.
Areas that they need to make proper investment in. And I also mentioned earlier, timely releases of the agriculture budget is quite important, and total releases of the capital component at the end of the fiscal year. So it has to be timely, it has to be total.
What is this elite capture you talk about?
Okay, it's just like if there are credit facilities that are available, it is the big politicians, former governors, current senators, retired generals, and so on, that will easily have access to such facility. And they get all the support, and they are just a few number of people, leaving the smallholder women farmers with little or nothing.
Is that what is happening in Nigeria?
It's what is happening across African countries, not only Nigeria. So it's important that the African leaders really reflect. How do we make sure that the right targeting is done? How do we make sure that we focus on wealth distribution across Africa in terms of the type of support we provide, especially through the agriculture sector? How can we ensure the right targeting?
Very well. I'll take it to Nicholus now. Nicholus, I just want us to touch briefly on two things before we wrap up. Sustainability of the fight against climate change, and what am I saying? Sustainability of projects that are aimed at fighting climate change, like irrigation. What are some of the ways that we can sustain these projects for long-term benefits?
Thank you. I just want to make a mention that just like what my president mentioned, the statement that he actually mentioned at the summit, that people tend to think better when they have eaten. So food is life, indeed. What we need really as Africa is to stand up and fight this hunger. Together we can do. Government then must actually embrace, the partnership with the private sector, all the NGOs that actually mean well when they come to work together to try and, bring the workable technologies, the ideas that are going to help us, where we need to actually look at the climate smart agriculture. So it is actually what it is right now. We cannot run away from this. There's actually the unprojected or unplanned way of how we are actually receiving the rainfall, like I said earlier on. The weather conditions are difficult to plan this time around. You may have the planners, the climate guys, telling you that meteorological guys, telling you that this year you are likely to receive below normal to probably normal rainfall, but it turns out to be, normal to above normal. So it's because of the human activities that are actually happening on the continent, where, some activities that we mentioned, like, plowing along the riverbanks, settling and building along the riverbanks, other bad vices of humankind, of deforestation. That is what actually is giving us these challenges.
But
now,
Nicholas, you would also agree that
you are saying.
You would also agree that as the population grows, we are going to need the land for those buildings. What I want you to address now is, how do we strike the balance between the need for housing and the need to grow our food?
Keminni, Africa has, like I say, we have a comparative advantage over these other continents. We have vast land, unused land. That is actually, like you may say, the forests, unused land, the arable land, plenty more than what we are actually, using or cultivating in Africa as a continent. Coming to Zambia, we have a lot of rivers that are flowing, perennial and non-perennial. We have land that is actually, being given to these small-scale farmers, commercial farmers. We also have them in good numbers. What we need to blend now is actually, how best do we need to have the sustainability, the continuity of production. Government, we cannot do anything without government. It must be some political will, in whatever agenda we are trying to push. I like, the point where, our government, of the Republic of Zambia has actually come in now to say, there's a drive towards a policy that allows women and youth to acquire land. That is not just land for venture, but it's land for investment. We want, in short, we are trying to promote, productivity, agriculture, to be able to to produce enough food for the country. What we want is Zambia to be food secure. When we are secure, we know that even the SADC region is also secure, and the entire continent is secure.
Very well. Azubike, I'll give you the last word.
You talked about those projects.
Very well. I apologize, Nicholus. Azubike, I'll give you the last word on this one. As you have rightly said, we need people in research, we need people in extension services, so that we can minimize things like post-harvest losses and the likes. Now, as they come out of that conference, what are some of the ways that you think, and quickly so, that they can make the entire chain attractive for young people?
So first of all, they need to start allocating 10% of the budget to the agriculture sector, 10% and more than 10%, and they need to prioritize youth and women with massive investments in extension services, processing and storage facilities, agroecology, research and coordination, and also access to cheap and easy credit. Because if farmers don't get affordable and easy access to credit, they can't even expand their enterprise. Indeed. And when you talk about processing facility, it has to be cottage processing facilities, small processing facilities to target different value chain in rural communities.
Indeed. Gentlemen, yes. We'll have to go. I'm afraid that this is all we can say on the subject this hour. Hopefully in a separate meeting we can discuss more on this. Thank you so much. Nicholus Obby Mainza has joined us from Zambia, and Azubike Nwokoye joined us from Abuja-Nigeria. My name is Keminni Amanor. The summit continues. We'll keep an eye on it here on The Square. We'll see you same time next Monday. Bye-bye.